Hi, welcome back to my channel, Infertile Mama. This is Elena Quiros, and I'm really glad that you checked back. You can tell it's hot and humid. Whenever it's humid here, my hair tends to poof out like a big ball, so I just decided to pull it back. But my face will be nice and shiny from perspiration. And I live in one of the most arid parts of the country. Utah is a desert, and so any of you back east watching are probably laughing at me that I even call it humid. I wanted to continue my little saga about our adoption experience, and I started off by talking about our little Abigail. It was 2010, and we had just gotten word that there was a family that was looking for a home for a baby, and it was miraculous because this baby was full Mexican, which I am, and it's rare to find full Mexican babies put up for adoption. In the culture that I'm from, you keep your babies whether you can afford it or not, and you raise them even if you live in a tent and eat rice and beans every day. You just don't place your babies for adoption. It's just part of the culture. So the fact that there was this Mexican baby available was such a miracle, and when we were told about this little miracle, we didn't even have to think about it. We just said, yes, this is our dream. And this was about November of 2009, and she was due at the end of December of 2009. My brother and his wife were expecting, and they had just had their baby in October of 2009, and I just wanted to have a child that had a cousin the same age, and I thought this couldn't be more perfect. It was really, since we had just found out in November and the baby was due in December, we had a lot of scrambling to do, a ton of paperwork. We had to do medical checks, we had to do background checks, we had to do paperwork, we had to get references and referrals. There was just so much we had to do that normally it takes, people are working on it for years in their quest for an adoption, but in our situation we hadn't been doing anything, so we had to really scramble. At the time, Josh and I always joke that we went backwards as far as having children. At the time, we had a college student living with us, my brother actually, who was going to Southern Utah University here and lived with us. And then my sister was having trouble with her teenage daughter, who was 14, in Las Vegas, and asked if I could take her in. And we did. And I worked at the high school here, and I thought, she's starting high school, she's in 9th grade, I can be her little ankle monitor and just watch her throughout the day. And I just thought of it as a good situation for her. And I knew that she had a lot of struggles, was coming from a lot of struggles, and 14 is a very intense age anyway. And I thought I was up for the challenge, but it proved to be a lot more than I had anticipated. My goal was for her to recognize her value, because I could tell that she didn't have much, and I could hear her playing the piano and singing, and so I put her in piano lessons and voice lessons because I knew she had a talent for that. And she had a lot of aggression, and I put her in cross country so that she could run and hopefully release some of those hormones that cause that kind of aggression, and just different things like that I thought might help her, on top of being there for her and just keeping it a safe environment, a happy environment at home. And it seemed to work. She seemed to thrive here, and we'd go for walks at night. We became close friends. Working at Cedar High School, I actually loved teenagers, and so I was excited to have my niece living with me. For the most part, we got along really well, and there were just times, like with any female at age 14, where things were hard. But so we had our college student and our teenager, and now we were looking towards getting an infant. And I remember during one of the hard times with my niece, my husband, I said, how do you even discipline? I don't know how to discipline a 14-year-old. I teach them at school and send them home to their families, but I'm the family. So what do? You can't spank her, send her to her room, ground her. I mean, she was beyond all that. And he said, all we can do is love her. And that was the best advice he could have ever given me. And I remember in one of my interviews with our social worker, she asked me, so how do you discipline a child? Are you into spanking? What is your form of discipline? And I just remembered what my husband had said about Jasmine, about my niece. And I said, you love that child. They will feel that love. And so no matter what you're asking of them or telling of them, if they feel that love from you, they're more inclined to obey. And it worked with my niece. It really did. I saw a transformation in her spirit. There was a light about her that I had never seen before. I guess they liked that answer because we were approved. Babies are very different than teenagers, that's for sure. And most people prefer the baby to the teenager. I'm the opposite. I'm afraid of babies and I love teenagers. And so anyway, I just remember by Christmas time, the reality of everything was starting to get to me and I was feeling really overwhelmed. And my niece, she would spend a lot of time around the holidays at home, which would kind of take her back to old habits. And it was hard to see her change so much after all of the work we'd put in and to have her come back with some of those old habits. And that on top of the strain of the adoption was really wearing on me. And I remember getting physically ill. I was really sick. I think I got pneumonia. I was sick and I was afraid. And going back to the cultural thing of how you don't really hear about Hispanic adoptions, my mom is a prime example. She said that is something that doesn't happen because Hispanic mothers will fight tooth and nail to get their baby back. So right now it sounds all glamorous and fun, but as soon as she's without her baby, she'll come back for it. And that was not what I needed to hear from my mom. I wanted some support. My mom just wasn't on board with it, and it was really important that I needed her. She was so devastated that we couldn't give birth to a biological child, and in her mind, adoption meant babysitting someone else's child, and that it would never truly be mine, and she would tell me that all the time. I remember New Year's Eve, the baby still hadn't come and was due at the end of December, so she was overdue, and I spent New Year's Eve at my mom's house, and she was really scared for me, I think. I think that was mostly what it was coming from, her negativity. And she just said, this is a big deal what you're doing. And I said, Mom, I just want a baby. I want a family of my own. And if this is what it takes, this is what's going to happen. And at that point, my niece decided to move out. She kind of liked being the center of attention for us. And she knew that this new baby was going to take our attention from her. And so she moved back in with her mom. And we left on not the best of terms with her mom because her mom expected me to keep her for the year, even though she knew that after 16 years of trying for a baby, we were finally getting a baby. I was surprised that she wasn't a little more supportive about that. So New Year's Eve came. I stayed with my mom, like I said. I remember in St. George there were fireworks and all kinds of fun things going on. There was a performance by the Jets, the old group from the 80s, and it was exceptionally cold for St. George, which never gets that cold. Even in the winter, it stays around 50 degrees, but that night it felt like it was 10 degrees. And I was already sick, and I got sicker. And I came back home, and then the next, that was a Friday, and then Saturday I was in bed sick all day, and Sunday I had church, and I was in charge of a women's organization, and I was supposed to conduct or teach or something, but I remember getting some roast cooking in the morning, and I went to check my phone, and there had been about 23 missed calls, and apparently I remember our dog, Neva, had been barking through the night, and I just would take NyQuil and just put earplugs in, like, stop barking, I need my sleep. And Neva seemed to know because she's not a barker. And for her to bark all night when we were expecting a baby, it was kind of unusual. Well, the baby was born that morning at 4:18 a.m. and our friend who had arranged the whole thing, who had told us about this baby, was the one who was at the hospital and had said, they won't tell me anything for HIPAA reasons and you have to get over here. All I know is the baby is stable. Didn't know gender, didn't know size or weight or any other health questions. And so we just booked it to the hospital, and we walked in, and I remember I said, we're adoptive parents to a baby that was just born, and they were excited to see us. They knew all about us. They said, oh, you want to see her? And that's the first thing I heard was her. It's a girl. I was so excited. And what's kind of ironic is before then, with all the trouble we had with my niece, I remember telling Josh, if we have a girl, I'm going to kill myself. And I kind of said it in joking, but it had been such a drama, just with the hormones and the teenagerness. And I thought, I can't deal with teenage girls. They're just too much. But once I found out it was a girl, all those fears, everything went away. It just felt so right. This was my baby girl. And we went in and saw there was two babies side by side, and they were both little brown babies, and they looked like twins. And Josh said, we got twins? He seemed a little bit horrified, and they said, no, just one. And then he was like, phew. And so they put us in a room, which I didn't know at the time, but the hospital calls the suite because it's the biggest room in the OB and in the labor and delivery unit, and it has a couch and two beds, and it's in the corner, so nobody can really walk by your room, and it's close to the nurse's station, close enough where you can get someone's attention if you need it. I was a little unsettled because we still didn't know the birth family. This was all closed, and yet they were just across the hall. So we were in one hall, the nurse's station, and they were on the other hall. And so it was a little unsettling to know that they were there and we didn't know who they were. Well, it turns out that the birth mother had an emergency C-section, that our baby was upside down, and so they had to take her into emergency surgery, so she never even got to hold the baby. So they brought the baby to me directly, and I got to be the first one to hold our little baby girl, and we named her Abigail Jane. And she was 7 pounds, I think 7 pounds 7 ounces, and she was 18 inches long. So she was a really long baby, thin and long. And where she'd been upside down, her little feet would stick behind her ears, and the doctor would try to pull them down, like to change her diaper, and they'd flip back up behind her ears, and it was so cute. Josh and I were so inexperienced. We'd make the doctors and nurses laugh because they said, okay, now it's your turn to change a diaper. And we had no idea what we were doing. We put the diaper on upside down and backwards, and they just laughed. And I was so scared of any little movement that I'd break a limb or hurt her head. And they were like, they're a lot stronger. They're made mom-proof. And so to not be so afraid. And he kind of showed me, he was pretty rough with her, the doctor was. And he just showed me, see, they're fine. And I just thought, stop hurting my baby. He wasn't hurting her. He was just kind of showing me how much strength they have in their arms and legs. And anyway, she was absolutely perfect, and she had a full head of hair. And my niece, we sent a picture, not my niece, my sister-in-law. We sent a picture to my sister-in-law who could show everybody the picture of her. And she says, she's wearing a wig. There's no way that is her hair that she was born with. But it was her hair. She was just a full head of black hair, and it was so adorable. We found out she was jaundice, and they wanted to put her under lights. They offered us to stay in that nice room, but we knew we needed the sleep, all the sleep that we could get before bringing the baby home. And I was still not feeling well, and so I came home. And in retrospect, I think, how did I leave my baby at the hospital without me? Like, when I think about that now, I'm mortified. But at the time, I didn't really know her. I hadn't formed a bond or an attachment. I hadn't carried her in my stomach or anything like that. So the nurses were a little surprised because they were like, of course you can stay here. You know, we know you want to. And I said, no, I want to go home and sleep in my bed. And they were a little surprised by that. But it's different with adoption. The bond comes later, for sure. So we went home and we slept, and it was about 2 nights that they kept her at the hospital under the lights, and in that time we had a lot of visitors, and they were pretty strict about visiting, but they gave 2 tags we could choose 2 people to visit, but we'd reuse the tags for everybody that came. So we had 20 people, different people that would come in and see the baby. And now that we're in the COVID age, I just laugh at how lax things were back then, but I'm really grateful that they were, so that everybody could get a chance to see her and hold her. So we, when it was time to bring her home, Josh's mom, my mother-in-law, was angelic. She stayed with us, and I thought, we got this, we're okay, I know how to change a diaper now. Well, she was still a little bit jaundiced, and they wanted to flush it out, so they said, you're going to need to feed her every 2 hours. Well, when you feed a baby, you still have to change their diaper, you got to wrap them, and you got to burp them and put them back to sleep, and that takes about 2 hours. So we're talking no sleep. The first full night of no sleep. And by about 3:30 a.m., I was getting a little scared, because when you don't sleep for that long, you kind of get irrational. And I was irrational, thinking, this is the rest of my life. I'm never going to sleep again. And I remember waking up my husband, and I said, I can't do this by myself. I need you to help me. And he shot out of bed. He says, oh, of course, I'll take over. Well, he had the same exact thought that I did, that this is our life and we'll never sleep again. And he changed her little diaper, and he kind of had a little bit of a breakdown, and Annette came in and took over, and she said, I wasn't here to take care of the baby, I was here to take care of you too. And I thought that was hilarious and so appropriate. She knew exactly what would happen to a couple of people who had no idea what to do with the baby. And she saved us. She stayed with us. My husband and I both suffer from different mental health issues. I have clinical depression with anxiety, and he has full-on anxiety with a little bit of depression, not like to the extent that I do. And his anxiety came out full force that first day with that baby, and and it manifests in a way physically for him. So he was in the bathroom vomiting all morning, and he ended up going to the doctor to get something to calm his nerves, and it put him out. He was laying on the couch just sleeping the whole time, and people were coming over in droves to come see the new baby, and Josh was laying on the couch the whole time. So it was kind of a funny time, but I was managing okay. He would have these irrational thoughts like, we can't do this, what did we sign up for? I don't think that this is right, we shouldn't have adopted, and just all these things, and it was scaring me that he was acting like this. Well, his mom was a trooper. She was with us through it all, and she just kept assuring us that it was the right thing, and that all new parents have crazy feelings. You just do. It's scary with your first one, especially with the first few nights of no sleep, and especially where we didn't have the pregnancy time to bond, and we rushed into the whole thing and been sick leading up to it. It was just a lot. And so she was so calm, and she was so understanding and compassionate, and it was just so nice to have her here. She cooked for us, and the people in the ward would cook for us too, and we just were so taken care of. I'm just really grateful for all the people who love us that much, and we're just so excited for us to finally have a new baby. I was waiting for my husband to pull out of his funk, because it was getting a little bit harder and harder for me. And so it was his birthday. So Abbey was born on January 3rd, and Josh's birthday is January 25th. And I remember that we went to lunch on his birthday, and while we were at lunch, Josh's mom was watching the baby. While we were at lunch, we got a phone call from our lawyer, and the lawyer said, the birth mom wants her baby back. And that was probably the worst thing that I could hear. My whole issue with adoption from day one was my fear of a birth family changing their minds. At least with IVF, it's between me and Josh and some doctors. We don't have to worry about other people's feelings, and I had always thought of the birth family as being so heroic to be able to give up a baby. And they had been so excited for us that initially during Thanksgiving they'd given us a big box that we opened, and it had a diaper cake in it and lots of toys, and we opened it with our family, and that was kind of our announcement that we're getting a baby. So this was such a shock to us, and I remember we were at lunch and I couldn't eat, and I was just sick that night. What I didn't realize was that was the beginning of a really long journey. The birth family was Mexican and spoke English as a second language, and they claimed that they were misinformed, that they didn't understand exactly their rights. In Utah, you have 3 days to change your mind. They have to make sure that the birth mother is of sound mind. So there's a social worker and 2 nurses as witnesses in the hospital to watch them relinquish their rights as a mother. And she did the 3 days and she signed. And then after 6 months, they just, social workers just kind of check on us and come to our house and make sure that we're bonding and clicking and things are working out. And then at the 6-month mark from birth, we were able to finalize with the judge, and then everything's done. And they misunderstood that the 3 days, they didn't understand the 3-day thing. They thought they had 6 months to change their mind about the relinquishment. And they claimed that they were misinformed, that they were manipulated, and that because of the language barrier, they misunderstood. And I can understand all of the things that they were feeling. And I learned later, I didn't know much, and it seemed like people in the community knew more than I did, and I would find out things, and I didn't know what was true and what wasn't. But it seemed to me that the birth mother for a little while was just crying a lot and upset and regretted her choice, but then she was fine. But the birth grandmother was not fine and said, I want this grandbaby back. And so they hired a lawyer that actually took on the case, which is supposedly ironclad. And we had to retain our lawyer. And this battle turned into a 4-year fight. And I don't want to say fight because we never still met this family. And that made it all the more unnerving because they lived in our town. They lived here in our same little tiny town. And we still had never met them and didn't know what they looked like. And I was afraid to go to the store because I was afraid I would run into them. I was afraid to let my baby wander anywhere when she started to walk. When she got a little bit older, we'd go to football games, and I almost carried her the whole time because I was afraid of anybody trying to take her. In October of 2011, when Abby was 1 year old, she was almost 2 at that point, we got a phone call from our lawyer who just wanted to warn us that there was a kidnapping plot taking place. Apparently at this time the birth mom was surrounded by bad people. She was they were drug dealers at the time. She's changed a whole lot. She's a different person now, but at the time she was so young. She was 16 years old, and she had friends who were in the drug business, so they had a lot of money. And they said, we are going to set it up so that there will be somebody waiting at the border and somebody waiting down deep in Mexico, and we're going to find this baby. We're going to take the baby, and we'll take the baby down to the border. And thank goodness, her sister, who had always been on our side, she was actually ostracized from her family because she was on our side and was always rooting for us. She called our clergy, she called the police, and the police called our lawyer, and our lawyer called us, so we were all aware of what was going on. And we were able to tell our neighbors and have the police come and patrol our street every night. I slept with Abby in her room every night, and we basically didn't let her out of our sight. And I just remember feeling just fear at the time, and not knowing what to expect. It was just, it was crazy. I mean, that's something you see on Lifetime television. That's not something that happens in real life. I mean, it just seemed so extraordinary to happen to us. And it was just the irony after all we'd been through, and how long we'd waited, and my fears of adoption. When I had mentioned to people, birth moms change their mind, people had actually said that it's like 1 in 100 that happens. It just doesn't happen very often, and I didn't have to fear that. And so for that to happen in such a dramatic way, there was just a lot of people who felt really bad. And what do you say? I mean, nobody could really say anything. And there were a lot of questions. People wanted to know this and that, and I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to leave my house. And I hit a low point. I had a depression point that was pretty low. I had also, the year prior, had a surgery where the ablation where I was infected. So the first 6 months of my poor baby's birth, I was laid up in bed from my infection. And then the second year, when she was almost 3, we had this horrifying ordeal with the kidnapping threat. There was one good time that I remember. My husband traveled for work at the time, and we went to San Francisco, and we took Abby with us. And he was in conferences and meetings all day, and so I got to spend the day with Abby. And I pushed her in her stroller, and we stayed in Union Square, which, if you've ever been there, it's hotels and kind of swanky shops, and it's just kind of an upper end area, and babies are pretty much unseen. You just don't see infants and toddlers anywhere. But we rode the trolley, and we went to Green Gate to the Golden Gate Bridge. We did some tours. We went to the park, the Golden Gate Park, and we just had such fun memories together. But then when I got back from San Francisco, I had a dream that I was pushing her stroller down San Francisco, and I looked in the stroller and she was gone. And so I was just haunted a lot through the first 2 years, just from what we were going through. Age 3, she was age 3, and as anyone who has children knows, 3 is a hard age anyway. That's when they start to push boundaries and test their limits and learn to talk enough to talk back, and just all the hard things. Some people call them 3-nagers. So she was a tough age, but she was actually a really easy baby. So even though she had the 3-year-old things, she was actually easy. And so that's what happened then. And I'm going to pause at that point, just so you know what happened, our first adoption. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that if you like this, that you will like it on my YouTube channel and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and maybe share with others who might be interested in this. And I don't mean for this to be an adoption horror story, even though it kind of turned out to be one, because our second story was the complete opposite, which is usual. This was just unusual, and here I am, happy and good on the other side of it, which is why I can even talk about it. But it's an interesting story, so I thought I would share. So anyway, thanks for tuning in.